This exchange to me was extremely illuminating because what we have here is the commissioner who's the head of the Food and Drug Administration, and then we get a drive-by spray of propaganda, disinformation, and ideological attacks.
It seems that the goal of Big Pharma is to get people hooked on for life on their products, whether it be an annual flu or COVID-19 vaccines, perpetual statins or lower cholesterol, beta blockers for high blood pressure, expensive never-ending cancer treatments. Yet all this intervention doesn't seem to yield much fruit. As head of the FDA, would you like to take an opportunity to express your regret in failing to curtail the chronic disease epidemic in America?
Arizona MAGA lunatic Paul Gosar, an all out and about white nationalist, is trying to posture as an anti-Big Pharma warrior, which would be commendable if this wasn't the real focus of his vitriol, grilling the head of the FDA.
Just last month, a federal court forced the FDA to retract tweets and statements for its years-long smear campaign against ivermectin as an effective treatment for COVID-19.
Yes, vaccines have side effects. The risk of being dead is lower if you're vaccinated. I personally participate in clinical trials when I have the chance so that we can have the data and the knowledge to make wise decisions, for example, and get vaccinated so we're less likely to be dead.
I get that, but why did you have to retract everything you said about ivermectin? Because your office came out against ivermectin. Now, I agree that there's some problems in the manufacturing of that dosage, but if in doubt, leave it out.
Before Commissioner Califf gives Paul Gosar a lesson in basic science, his fighting for a gotcha moment and a good soundbite from Califf about ivermectin is a perfect caricature of today's Republican Party. A whole lot of political theater and cheap stunts at the expense of American lives.
We didn't retract everything we had to say about ivermectin. And in fact, you posited that we had an attack against ivermectin. Drugs are not.
I hope the courts are watching this right now because they ordered you to.
If you look at the randomized trials of ivermectin, and there are many of them now, there is no benefit of ivermectin in the treatment of COVID. That's a statement, just a fact. So it actually won a Nobel Prize because it's an amazing drug, both for animals and humans who have worms. And there was a good reason to think it may work in the case of COVID, and that's why, thankfully, the community, including the NIH, did a number of randomized clinical trials. There's just no benefit, and that's true of most things that we try. There's nothing wrong with thinking it might work. It just didn't.
You couldn't get much better of an answer during a congressional hearing than this. And to any rational person, this is how science and medicine should work. But to Gosar and the rest of the anti-vaxxers in Congress, it's a hill they're willing to die on, which is where Jamie Raskin comes in.
Let me try to sort some of this out, and maybe we'll help to illuminate why we have a Food and Drug Administration rather than leaving it to politicians in state legislatures or in Congress to make decisions based on ideological whim. Well, what about hydroxychloroquine, which was another thing that was advocated?
Basically the same story. There was really exciting preliminary work in the laboratory that said hydroxychloroquine may have activity against COVID, so the randomized trials were done. Unfortunately, no benefit. Again, nothing wrong with thinking it may work and trying it out in a randomized trial, but then we have the data now, so that leads you to the conclusions.
I'm aware of a lot of political attacks and criticism against the FDA, but I can never figure out the coherence of it. Sometimes they seem to be saying, get out of the way and just let anybody advocate whatever they want and use whatever they want without any testing and without the various protocols you go through. And then other times they attack you because you don't have enough authority to do the things that we would want you to do in order to make kids' cinnamon applesauce clean, for example. Last Congress, we passed a bipartisan bill to help address those shortages, but nearly 200 House Republicans voted against a second bill to give FDA resources to strengthen its oversight and inspection of facilities to prevent shortages like that from happening. So we can't have it both ways. If we want an effective, strong regulator, we've got to give them the authority and the resources to get the job done.
Regulating industries is about having standards, folks. Standards we should all be able to get behind. Consumers, workers, governments, and businesses. It just sets the table for mutual expectations. The problem is the 1%ers who own nearly all of our country's wealth, they don't want mutual accountability, which is why they do all they can to limit and crush regulation and keep labor from organizing. Profits over everything.
H.R. 2925 would resolve harmful permitting uncertainty and litigation delays caused by a harmful 2019 rogue court decision known as the Rosemont decision. This decision revoked a previously approved mine plan to my great state of Arizona, ignoring 40 years of federal permitting and land management regulations. The uncertainty caused by Rosemont threatens to add years of delays to an already overburdened 30-year proposed mining projects for 30 years on federal lands in the United States. Congress should act to remedy the fallout created by Rosemont and must work to expedite mine permitting and build up domestic mineral supply chains.
On its face, Gosar's argument seems to be relatively moderate given his history. But once you dig just a little bit deeper, the sinister motives come out. H.R. 2925, the resolution he's arguing for now, allows mining companies to use, occupy, and conduct infrastructure operations on public land, regardless of whether or not useful minerals are found on that land. So in short, this bill would give private mining businesses even more and make it easier for them to access publicly owned land. You know, in that same vein, the Rosemont decision Gosar mentioned actually denied the construction of a multi-billion-dollar open pit copper mining plant in the Coronado National Forest just outside of Tucson, ruling that the U.S. Forest Service illegally approved of the mine's construction because no valuable minerals were found on site. Now, the mine also would have covered around 4,000 acres of publicly owned land with the dumping of toxic waste and the mine's infrastructure. Gosar would have loved to campaign on and take credit for this project. So it's no wonder he's still holding a grudge 5 years later, especially since he's acting on his donors' behalf.
Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill that would provide much needed certainty for domestic mining projects.
We have heard repeatedly from across the aisle that mining pollution is a thing of the past, that today's modern mining industry operates under the highest environmental standards, and that after the mining operations stop, the industry cleans up after itself. If that sounds too good to be true, it's because it is.
California Representative Katie Porter is about to take Gosar and his mining buddies to school.
Our current regulations require companies to post financial assurances to cover the cost of cleanup after their mining operations stop. But it is not enough. Dangerous pollution still happens far too often. Depending on the mine type and location, between 74 and 82% of modern-day mines are polluting beyond what their permits allow. And the kicker? Taxpayers pay domestic and foreign mining companies for their subsidies and often the entire cost of cleanup. Given the $54 billion backlog to clean up mines abandoned before our current reclamation regulations, which continue to pollute our lands, waters, and communities, the American taxpayer literally cannot afford new mining pollution.
You know, on this one, Katie Porter is brilliant. Her takedown of Gosar links unregulated private business to skirting the law and not holding up their end of the bargain with pollution and following the environmental safeguards in place. I mean, haven't we learned anything about private businesses? Each and every time they'll take a mile when given an inch by the government. They'll do anything in their power to skirt regulations in order to increase profits. And remember, that's how our country was designed. It hasn't been about you, the people, in a long time, unless you count taking from all of us to enrich a few.
That's why I filed an amendment to this bill to improve bonding requirements and make mining companies keep up with the new mining rush that this bill would enable. This is a common sense amendment. If we're going to allow a toxic mining free-for-all, we should at least make sure that taxpayers are not footing the bill. After all, this bill opens up our lands to our foreign adversaries, and I don't expect them to clean up after themselves out of the goodness of their hearts. So my amendment would make sure operators post financial assurances to fully cover reclamation of all mining activities. It would correct for inconsistencies in both BLM and Forest Service regulations and codify those corrections into law. And it would have made sure these financial assurances were real money, like surety bonds, irrevocable letters of credit, certificates of deposit, or cash, not insurance policies that lapse if the mining company goes bankrupt. It is time we hold industry accountable and make sure they cannot pass on the costs of cleaning up after themselves, the costs of their earning profits, onto the American people. But guess what? The Republican majority refused to even consider my amendment. They blocked it from getting a debate on the House floor and even from getting a simple up or down vote. It's outrageous, and it paints a dark picture of the House Republicans' priorities.